Get back to work now. No, I won't. I'm sick of your orders. Enough. What's going on here? Dad, tell her to obey me. No, not anymore. You can't treat me like this. Get back to work now. Don't speak to me like that. I'm not your employee. What did you say? My father pays you. Your father isn't here, and I won't tolerate you. This won't stand. Get back to work now. Don't ignore me. Do as I say. Enough. I won't allow her to speak to me like that. You can't silence me. Yes, I can, and I will. Just a moment, please. Get back to work now, the millionaire's spoiled daughter demanded, but the cleaner silenced her. Get back to work this instant, you useless maid, before I rip that apron off you and throw you out onto the street like the trash you are. Regina Sterling's shriek cut through the mansion's air like a whip. The guests, sipping champagne in the grand drawing room, fell silent instantly. Their glasses hung, suspended in the air, and in the midst of that marble and gold silence, a woman in a blue and white uniform stood motionless, a cleaning cloth still in her hand. Catherine Kate Reed didn't lower her gaze. She was 31, with green eyes that seemed to hold ancient storms, and dark hair pulled back in an impeccable bun. Her white apron was clean, her shoes worn but gleaming, and even though the city's richest heiress pointed her index finger inches from her face, Catherine didn't retreat a single step. I'm speaking to you, or are you deaf as well as clumsy? Regina spat, her contemptuous gaze sweeping over Catherine's uniform as if she were looking at an insect. You spilled wine on my friend's dress. Do you know how much that dress costs? More than you'll earn in your entire miserable life cleaning floors. Miss, it was your friend who tripped into me, Catherine replied, her voice so calm it sounded sharper than any shout. I was just passing with the tray. Don't contradict me, Regina shrieked, her perfectly made-up face contorting with rage. Who do you think you are to open your mouth? You're nobody, a nobody who cleans my bathrooms. Kneel and apologize to my friend right now. A murmur ran through the room. Some guests looked away uncomfortably. Others smiled with that elegant cruelty of those who enjoy seeing those beneath them humiliated. Regina's friend, a young woman in a golden dress, watched the scene with a smug little smile, awaiting her spectacle. Catherine looked at the white marble floor she herself had polished on her knees that morning. For an instant, everyone believed she would bow, that she would break, that the cleaner would apologize through tears, as they had so many times seen employees bend before the Sterlings. But Catherine raised her head and then spoke. I will kneel the day I've done something to be ashamed of, miss, and today is not that day. I work with my hands, it's true, but I prefer 1,000 times to have hands dirty from honest work than to have a soul soiled by treating those who cannot defend themselves this way. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if someone had muted the sound of the world. Regina's friend's smug smile vanished. A couple of guests' mouths dropped open in astonishment. And Regina, the untouchable Regina Sterling, was speechless for the first time in her life, her finger still pointing in the air, her mouth slightly ajar, and her cheeks flushed with a red that her makeup couldn't quite conceal. No one dared to breathe. You, Regina stammered, searching for a reply that wouldn't come. How dare you? I dare because I have dignity, Catherine said. It's the only thing money couldn't buy you, miss, and it's the only thing no one has ever been able to take from me. And it was at that very moment, as the words still floated in the air like suspended crystals, that a deep voice resonated from the top of the grand marble staircase. What's going on here? All heads turned. At the top of the gilded marble staircase, one hand resting on the banister, stood Alexander Sterling, 46 years old, a widower, owner of one of the country's most powerful business groups. He wore an immaculate, custom-tailored navy suit, and his strong-featured face bore an expression no one in that room had ever seen on him before. Absolute bewilderment. He had heard everything, every word. He descended the stairs slowly, his gaze fixed on the scene. His daughter with her finger raised, her face contorted with rage, and facing her, the cleaner, serene, upright, meeting her gaze without a single tremor. Dad! Regina rushed, changing her tone instantly, modulating her voice into a victim's whine. Dad, this woman disrespected me in front of everyone. She ruined the party. You have to fire her right now. Alexander didn't respond immediately. His dark, penetrating eyes rested on Catherine, and for a moment, something strange stirred within him, something that had been dormant for years. He couldn't name it. He only knew that this woman in uniform, standing in the middle of his drawing room full of powerful people, possessed a resilience he had never seen, not even in the wealthiest men who sat at his table. Is what my daughter said true? Alexander asked, addressing Catherine directly. Did you spill the wine? It was an accident, sir, she replied. Miss Sterling's friend tripped into me as I was crossing with the tray, but if you believe I should pay for it, I will, even if it takes me months." "We don't want your beggar's money," Regina jumped in. "We want you gone." "Regina!" Alexander's voice fell like a stone slab. Silence. The heiress froze. Her father had never spoken to her like that. Never. In her 23 years of life, Alexander Sterling had never raised his voice to her in front of anyone. Her cheeks went from the red of rage to the white of indignation. "Are you defending her?" Regina asked in a thin, incredulous voice. "A maid over your own daughter?" "I'm seeking the truth," Alexander replied, which is not the same thing. The entire room held its breath. The guests, those magnates and perfumed wives who had come to drink the Sterling's champagne, were now witnessing something much more delicious than any party. The crack, the fissure, the first tremor in the armor of the city's most powerful family. Catherine, however, didn't seem to enjoy any of it. On the contrary, she finally lowered her gaze, not out of fear, but out of a kind of deep weariness, and said in a low voice, "With your permission, sir, I prefer to withdraw to the kitchen. I don't want to cause any more scandal in your home. I only came to work." And she turned around. As she walked away down the long marble corridor, her back straight and her steps firm, something fell to the floor from her apron pocket, a small, metallic object that clinked against the marble and rolled to a stop at Alexander's feet. He bent down and picked it up. It was a small, old silver music box, its varnish worn, with a tiny ballerina carved on the lid, so modest, so humble, that it was utterly out of place with everything around it. The gold, the marble, the crystal chandeliers. Alexander turned it in his fingers. On the base, engraved in shaky script, was an inscription almost erased by time. "To my Kate, never stop singing. Love, Mum." Something tightened in his chest. "Wait," he called. But Catherine had already disappeared behind the service door. That night, long after the last guest had left and the mansion fell silent, Alexander Sterling remained alone in his study by the fireplace, the little music box in his hand. He opened it. A fragile, sweet melody, an old lullaby, filled the room. And for the first time in years, since his wife's death, the city's most feared millionaire felt something moisten his eyes. He didn't understand what was happening to him. He didn't understand why he couldn't stop thinking about that woman's words. "I prefer to have hands dirty from honest work than a soiled soul." Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, a small girl slept with a fever. Lucy was 6 years old, with brown hair and flushed cheeks. Catherine tiptoed in, sat on the edge of the narrow bed, and placed a hand on her daughter's too-hot forehead. Her heart sank again. She knew what that recurring fever meant. She knew what the doctor said, and she knew she didn't have money for the treatment her daughter needed. That's why she endured. That's why she swallowed humiliations, shouts, disdain. That's why she didn't respond when Regina insulted her day after day. For her daughter. Only for her daughter. "Mum," Lucy murmured, opening her eyes slightly. "Where's my music box? I can't sleep without Grandma's song." Catherine reached into her empty apron pocket. Her heart dropped. "I left it in the drawing room, my love," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll get it back tomorrow, I promise. Go to sleep. Mum will sing you the song tonight." And as Catherine sang her mother's lullaby in a very low voice, her voice broken by the tears she wouldn't allow herself to shed, 2 floors above, in his study, a powerful man listened to the same melody coming from a small silver box, not yet knowing that this small object was about to change forever. The destiny of everyone living under that roof. The war had barely begun, and the cleaner who had silenced the millionaire's spoiled daughter had no idea that she had lit a flame that no one could extinguish. 2 worlds under the same roof. The Sterling mansion always woke at the same hour, 5 a.m. But it wasn't the owners who woke it, but those who served. Catherine had already been on her feet for 2 hours, when the first ray of sun crossed the main dining room windows. She had waxed the floors, dusted ancient portraits, shaken out silk curtains, and set the breakfast table with a watchmaker's precision. Her hands were reddened by the cold water, and a question was lodged in her chest since the night before. Where was her daughter's music box? "Good morning, my dear," a raspy voice said from the kitchen doorway. Elsie McTavish, the cook, shuffled in, wiping her hands on her apron. She was 70, with white hair gathered in a hairnet and a tongue so sharp that, as she herself claimed, she could peel an orange from a distance. She had been cooking in that house for 40 years. She had seen Regina born. She had buried the late Mrs. Sterling and knew all the family's secrets better than Alexander himself. "Good morning, Elsie. You look like a lost soul, child." The old woman narrowed her eyes. Tell this old woman what's troubling you. And don't lie to me. I've got more wrinkles than a map, and all of them are from reading faces. Catherine sighed and told her about the music box. There was no need to tell her about the night before. All the staff had been talking since dawn about the moment the cleaner had silenced the spoiled girl in front of half the world. Ha! Elsie let out a laugh that made the pots tremble. Finally, 40 years I've been waiting for someone to shut that spoiled brat's mouth. Last night I laughed so hard in my room, I almost choked on my tea. You told her what none of us ever dared, my dear. You're my hero. I don't feel like a hero at all, Catherine murmured. I feel like I've signed my dismissal. Bah! The cook waved her hand dismissively. If the master wanted to fire you, you'd already be on the street. And look at you, you're still dusting. That means something, child. That means much more than you think. At that moment, a bell chimed on the service panel. The dining room, Catherine said, adjusting her apron. It's breakfast. Watch out for the viper, Elsie warned, lowering her voice. A wounded snake bites twice as hard. Catherine crossed the long hallway and pushed open the dining room door. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the endless mahogany table, where at one end Alexander Sterling read the newspaper, and at the other, Regina listlessly picked at fruit, still in her silk robe, wearing dark glasses despite being indoors. The atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. Good morning, Catherine greeted, serving coffee with steady hands. Alexander lowered his newspaper, looked at her, said nothing, but followed her with his eyes as she circled the table. There was something different in the way he looked at her that morning. It was no longer the look given to a piece of furniture or a shadow. It was the look given to a person. Regina, on the other hand, glared at her over her glasses. Well, the local hero is still here, she spat. I thought after last night's little performance, you'd have the decency to resign. But of course, your kind has no decency, only need. Regina. Alexander didn't raise his voice, but the tone was enough. What? Now I can't even speak in my own house? The heiress threw her napkin onto the table. This is unbelievable. A maid humiliates me in front of my friends. And I'm the problem? At what point, Dad? At what point did you become so what? He asked, setting the newspaper aside. Regina pressed her lips together. She wanted to say something cruel, something definitive, but her father's gaze held her back. Instead, she stood up with an abrupt movement, spilling orange juice on the white tablecloth. Let her clean it, she said with contempt, pointing at the mess. That's what you pay her for. And she stormed out of the dining room, slamming the door so hard it made the crystal vibrate. There was an uncomfortable silence. Catherine silently approached and began to wipe up the spilled juice with a cloth. Alexander watched her do it. You don't have to clean that, he said suddenly. Catherine stopped, surprised. It's my job, sir. I know, but you don't have to do it because she orders you to in that way. Alexander cleared his throat as if the words cost him enormous effort. About last night, I want to apologize. My daughter shouldn't have treated you like that, and I shouldn't have allowed that situation to go so far. Catherine was speechless. In her years of service, no employer had ever apologized to her, not once. It's not necessary, sir, she said finally. You didn't do anything wrong. I allowed it to happen. That's something. He looked into her eyes. Something fell out of your pocket last night, a music box. Catherine's heart skipped a beat. Yes, you found it, sir. It's very important to me, sir. It's my mother's, and my daughter can't sleep without its melody. Your daughter? Alexander frowned. She lives here in the house? In the staff quarters, sir. She's 6. Her name is Lucy. Catherine hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I know it's not allowed. It is allowed, he interrupted. I hadn't realized you had a daughter. Something stirred in his memory an echo of his own life, of his own small daughter running through these halls so many years ago when she still laughed. I'll return the music box. I have it in my study. Thank you, sir. You truly don't know what it means to us. Alexander nodded, stood up, and before leaving, paused at the door. Without turning around, he said, What you said last night, about dirty hands and a clean soul. He paused. I've been thinking about that all night. And he left, leaving Catherine with the cloth in her hand and her heart beating in a way she didn't understand. That afternoon, as Catherine hung laundry in the backyard, an elegant shadow approached through the garden. It wasn't Alexander, it was Regina, and she wore the dangerous smile of someone who had been plotting for hours. You think you're very clever, don't you? She said, approaching with her arms crossed. You think that just because my father pitied you last night, your life is all set. Let me tell you something. Cleaner. She leaned in until her face was inches from Catherine's. "This is my house, my name, my inheritance, and I'm going to make sure that you and that sick brat you're hiding in the staff quarters end up on the street where you belong. Your days are numbered." Catherine stopped hanging laundry, turned slowly, and looked Regina in the eyes, without fear, but with immense sadness. "Why do you hate me so much, miss?" she asked in a low voice. "I've never done anything to you. All I want is to work and feed my daughter. What did I do to deserve so much contempt?" The question seemed to disarm Regina for an instant. Something crossed her eyes, doubt, pain, but it vanished quickly, buried under layers of pride. "You don't need to do anything," Regina replied coldly. "Your very existence bothers me." And she turned around, walking away through the rose bushes with her queenly stride. What Catherine couldn't see was what lay hidden behind that venom. Regina Sterling didn't hate the cleaner for what she was. She hated her for what she had. A daughter who looked at her with love, a dignity that money couldn't buy, and the attention of a father that she, the true daughter, and had lacked her entire life since her mother died, and Alexander buried himself in work to avoid the pain. That night, Elsie McTavish found Catherine sitting on the kitchen steps, looking at the stars. "I warned you, my dear," the old woman said, sitting beside her with 2 cups of hot cocoa. "The snake is wounded, and now it will want to bite." "I'm not afraid of Regina," Catherine replied. "I'm afraid of what she might do to my Lucy just to hurt me." Elsie put an arm around her shoulders. "Listen carefully, child. I've been in this house for 40 years, and I've seen everything come and go, but there's one thing I've learned. Evil makes a lot of noise, but it always trips over its own malice. You do your job, take care of your daughter, and keep your soul clean, as you yourself said. Time takes care of the rest, and this old heart tells me something is changing in this house. Something big." Upstairs, in his study, Alexander Sterling looked out the window at the moonlit courtyard, the music box open on his desk, playing softly. He thought of a feverish child he didn't know. He thought of a woman who cleaned his floors and yet had more nobility than all the people who sat at his table. And above all, he thought of a question he had been avoiding for years. What had his family become? What had he become? He didn't know yet, but he was about to find out, because the next day, a very valuable jewel was going to disappear from the late Mrs. Sterling's room, and Catherine Reed's name would be the first to be uttered. The scream that cut through the morning this time was not Regina's, but Alexander Sterling's. "It's gone." "What?" His voice echoed throughout the mansion, down the marble stairs, through the hallways, and reached the kitchen, where Catherine dropped the knife she was peeling potatoes with. Something in that scream made her skin crawl. On the second floor, in front of the room that had belonged to the late Mrs. Sterling, a room no one touched, preserved as a sanctuary for years, Regina held an open, empty velvet box, her face contorted in a perfectly rehearsed grimace of horror. "Mum's necklace, Dad," she sobbed. "The emerald necklace you gave her on her last anniversary. It's gone. Someone came in and stole it." Alexander paled. That necklace was priceless, not just for its enormous value, but because it was the last thing he had given his wife before illness took her. It was a piece of his memory. "Who enters this room?" he asked, his voice trembling with contained fury. "No one is allowed in here. No one, only the cleaning staff." "Sir," said Mr. Davies, the butler, who had rushed to the commotion, "to dust once a week." "And who cleaned here this week?" The butler swallowed. Regina, behind her father, formed an invisible smile. "Catherine, sir, the new one. She was here yesterday afternoon, all alone." Silence fell like a guillotine. "Bring her," Alexander ordered. When Catherine came up the stairs, wiping her hands on her apron, not understanding what was happening, she found the entire family and staff gathered in the hallway, staring at her. Their looks didn't lie. They had already judged her, already condemned her. Only the sentence was missing. "Catherine," Alexander said, and it cost him to pronounce her name. "A very valuable necklace has disappeared from this room. You were the only person here yesterday. I need you to tell me the truth. Do you know anything about this?" Catherine felt the ground open beneath her feet. "No, sir," she replied, and her voice didn't tremble. "I cleaned this room yesterday. It's true. I dusted, tidied the portraits, and then I left. I didn't touch any jewelry. I didn't open any chests. I swear on my daughter that I know nothing about that necklace." "Liar!" Regina jumped forward, her eyes filled with fake tears. "Of course, it was you. A starving cleaner with a sick daughter who needs medicine. Who else would steal? It's obvious. Search her room. Search her things. I bet the necklace is hidden among her rags." A murmur of approval ran through the staff. Regina's logic was cruel, but it sounded convincing. The poor, the needy, the desperate. Isn't the poorest always the first suspect? Catherine looked into Alexander's eyes, and what she saw broke her heart. Doubt. After the apologies, after the music box, after everything, the millionaire doubted her. "Search my room, sir," Catherine said with dignity. "Search everything I own, which isn't much. I have nothing to hide." Everyone went up to the staff quarters, and there was Lucy, sitting on the narrow bed, hugging a worn teddy bear, looking with her big, frightened eyes at all these strange people invading her small world. When the butler began to empty Catherine's only drawer, the child burst into tears. "Mum, what are they doing? Why are they throwing our things around?" "It's okay, my love," Catherine said, kneeling to hug her. "Nothing's wrong. They're just looking for something. They'll be gone soon." They searched everything: the drawer, the mattress, the old suitcase under the bed, the pockets of her 2 uniforms. They took out the few belongings that fit in that miserable room and scattered them over the bed. A worn rosary, a faded photograph of Catherine hugging a young man, Lucy's deceased father, an envelope with unpaid hospital bills, and an almost empty bottle of the child's medicine. Each object told a story of dignified poverty, of a woman's sacrifice, barely surviving, but of an emerald necklace. There was no trace. "It's not here, sir," the butler repeated awkwardly as he clumsily returned things to their place. Elsie McTavish, who had come up to see what was happening, crossed her arms in the doorway and stated in her raspy voice, "Of course, it's not. This child is incapable of stealing even a crumb of bread, and everyone on staff knows it. The only theft here is the audacity of accusing her without proof." And she shot a fiery glance at Regina, who pretended not to hear her. "Nothing. There was no emerald necklace." "It's not here," the butler said, bewildered. Regina frowned. That wasn't part of her plan. "Well, she must have hidden it somewhere else, or she's already sold it. These women are very clever, Dad. Don't be fooled by her innocent face." Alexander looked at Catherine, kneeling on the floor, hugging her crying daughter, surrounded by her poor belongings scattered on the floor, and something inside him rebelled against everything he was seeing. "Enough," he said. "This is over for now." "For now?" Regina shrieked. "Dad, she stole Mum's necklace. Call the police. Have her arrested." "I have no proof that she took it," Alexander replied firmly. "And I'm not going to destroy a person's life or separate a mother from her daughter based on suspicion. In this house, as long as I live, things are done with justice. I will investigate this matter thoroughly, and when I know the truth, I will act accordingly, no matter who the culprit is." Regina turned white. She hadn't expected that. She expected to see the cleaner dragged away by the police, crying, pleading, defeated. Instead, her father was defending her. Again. "You're blinded," Regina muttered under her breath. "That woman has you enchanted." And she stormed out. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. Sitting by Lucy's bed, she replayed what had happened over and over. She knew she was innocent, but she also knew that innocence isn't always enough when the powerful want to see you fall. And Regina wanted to see her fall with all her heart. "Mum," Lucy whispered, still awake. "Why does that pretty lady hate us so much?" Catherine stroked her hair. "She doesn't hate us, my love. She's angry. And sometimes people who are very sad inside do bad things outside. But we're not going to be like that, are we? We're going to keep being good no matter what happens, even if they treat us badly. Because being good isn't a favor we do for others, my love. It's a gift we give ourselves." Lucy nodded, satisfied with the answer, and snuggled against her mother. What neither of them knew was that at that very instant, 2 floors above, Alexander Sterling had begun his investigation, and he had done so in a way no one expected, by reviewing the mansion's security cameras. Sitting alone in his study in front of the screen, the millionaire fast-forwarded the previous day's recordings. He saw Catherine enter his late wife's room at 4 p.m. He saw her dust, tidy the portraits with almost reverent care, and even pause for a moment in front of Mrs. Sterling's photograph and cross herself in a sign of respect. He saw her leave at 4:30 p.m. with empty hands, gently closing the door. She hadn't touched any chests. Alexander frowned and continued fast-forwarding the recording. 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., the hallway empty. And then at 8:17 p.m., a figure appeared on the screen. A figure he knew very well. A figure who opened the door to the forbidden room. She entered with a confident stride and emerged 3 minutes later, tucking something shiny into the pocket of her silk robe. Alexander's face darkened. The camera didn't lie, but before he could process what he had just seen, his phone rang. It was a call from his partner about an urgent company matter. A new name appeared in the conversation, a name that would be repeated in the following days. a charming and ambitious young businessman named Damien Thorne, who had started frequenting Regina, and who, according to rumors, was already planning something much bigger than a simple courtship. Alexander turned off the camera screen. He had the proof in his hands, but he decided to wait. He decided to observe, because a wise man doesn't show his cards too soon, and because, deep down, a part of him still refused to believe what his own eyes had just seen. Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, Catherine finally closed her eyes, unaware that the truth had begun to emerge, unaware that the camera had absolved her, and unaware that the innocence she so fiercely defended was about to be confirmed by the smallest and most unexpected mouth in the entire mansion, that of a 6-year-old girl. Because the next day, Lucy Reed would meet Alexander Sterling, and nothing would ever be the same. It was fate, or perhaps innocence, that led Lucy to escape from the staff quarters that morning. Catherine had fallen asleep for just a few minutes, overcome by the exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights, and the child, bored and curious, opened the door and went out to explore the enormous palace that was her new home. She walked barefoot through the marble hallways, amazed by the soaring ceilings, the giant paintings, the crystal chandeliers that hung like cascades of light. And so, without intending to, she reached the conservatory, where a tall, serious man was having his morning coffee, alone, reading some documents. Alexander looked up and saw her, a small girl in a nightgown, with messy hair and a worn teddy bear dangling from one hand. "Hello," Lucy said without a hint of fear. "Are you the owner of this big house?" Alexander, who in his life intimidated businessmen with a single glance, was disarmed by this creature. "Yes," he replied, putting down his documents. "That's me." "And who are you?" "I'm Lucy. My mum cleans your house." The girl approached without shyness and sat in the chair opposite him, swinging her legs that didn't reach the floor. "Your house is very pretty, but it's a bit sad." "Sad?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Why do you say it's sad?" "Because there's no laughter," Lucy replied with the crushing logic of children. "In happy houses, there's always laughter. Here, there's only silence. You don't have anyone to laugh with." The question struck Alexander somewhere very deep. It had been years since anyone had made him laugh. Since his wife died, the house had filled with a thick silence, and his daughter Regina and he had become 2 strangers sharing a last name. "There used to be laughter," he said in a low voice. "A long time ago, and what happened? They left with someone who is no longer here." Lucy looked at him with those big, understanding eyes. "Someone left me too. My daddy went to heaven when I was a baby. Mom says people who go to heaven don't really leave. They stay in the nice memories." She paused. "Do you have nice memories of your person?" Alexander felt a lump in his throat. This child, in 2 minutes, had touched wounds he had been avoiding for a decade. "Yes," he murmured. "Many." "What was her name?" Lucy asked, resting her chin on her small hands. "Beatrice," Alexander replied, and he was surprised at how little it hurt to say that name aloud for the first time in years. Her name was Beatrice, and she loved flowers. "That's why I had this conservatory built, so there would always be flowers, even when she wasn't here." "How pretty," Lucy said, looking around at the orchids and roses blooming under the glass dome. "So, this garden is like a big memory, right? A memory you can touch." Alexander looked at her for a long time. This child saw things that adults, with all their money and education, had long stopped seeing. "Yes," he said in a low voice. "That's exactly what it is." "Then you're not so alone," Lucy concluded with a smile. "Memories keep you company, and now you have me as a friend too, if you want. I'm a very good friend. I share my crayons with everyone." For the first time in a decade, a genuine laugh, soft but true, escaped Alexander Sterling's lips. At that moment, Catherine appeared running down the hallway, her face distraught with anguish. "Lucy, darling, you can't run around the house." She took her hand and turned to Alexander, terrified. "Sir, I apologize profusely. She slipped away while I was sleeping. It won't happen again. Please don't be angry." "I'm not angry," Alexander interrupted her. And to Catherine's surprise, there was a new softness in his voice. "On the contrary, your daughter is extraordinary. I haven't had such an honest conversation in a long time." Catherine blinked, not knowing what to say. "Mum, the gentleman is sad because someone went to heaven, just like with us," Lucy explained. "I told him, memories keep you company. Isn't that right?" "Isn't that right, my love?" Catherine responded, her eyes moist. And then something happened that changed everything. Lucy, seeing the silver music box on the table, which Alexander had brought down from his study that morning, determined to return it, let go of her mother's hand and ran towards it with a cry of joy. My music box, Grandma's song. She hugged it to her chest. Mum, he found it. The gentleman found it. Alexander watched the scene. The child hugging that humble object with more happiness than he had seen in his own daughter hugging thousands of dollars worth of jewels. And something clicked clearly in his mind. That little box, he said. Is it really that important to you? It's the only thing I have left of my mother, sir, Catherine replied. She used to sing it to me as a child in our village, and I sing it to Lucy. It has no value to anyone else, but to us, it's worth more than all the gold in the world. Alexander nodded slowly. He thought of the emerald necklace. He thought of the empty chest. He thought of the camera recording, and he understood with painful clarity the abysmal difference between the woman in front of him, capable of cherishing a tin box out of love, and the person who had stolen a priceless necklace out of pure malice. Catherine, he said, I want you to know something. I already know who took my wife's necklace. Catherine held her breath. And it wasn't you, he continued. I know for certain. The security cameras recorded everything. I owe you an apology for doubting you, even for a single moment. I'm sorry. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of immense relief, of a gratitude that wouldn't fit in her chest. Thank you, sir, she whispered. You don't know what it means to me that you believe me. People like me almost never have anyone who believes them. Well, I believe you, Alexander said firmly, and from today on, things in this house are going to change. That same afternoon, Alexander met Regina in his study. He showed her, without a word, the camera recording, herself at 8:17 p.m. entering her mother's room and leaving with the necklace in her pocket. Regina paled, but true to her nature, she didn't break. She raised her chin arrogantly. So what? She said. It's my mother's necklace. I have more right than anyone to have it. I just put it away. You hid it to blame an innocent woman, Alexander replied with a disappointment that weighed more than any shout. You wanted to destroy a mother and leave a child without her mum, just for your wounded pride. That, Regina, is not a whim. That is cruelty, and I will not tolerate it. She has you enchanted, Regina exploded. First you defend her, then you believe her, now you protect her. Don't you realize how it looks, Dad? People will talk, a maid and you. The people who matter talk about what one does, not what one has, Alexander replied. And what you just did shames me more than any rumor. You will return the necklace to its place, and you will apologize to Catherine. Today, never. Regina stood up in a fury. I'd rather die than apologize to that penniless woman. And she stormed out, slamming the door. What Regina did next would mark the next chapter of that war. She took her phone and called the only person who, in her world of solitude and pride, seemed to understand her, Damien Thorne, the charming young businessman who had been courting her with sweet words and brilliant promises. Damien, she said through tears of rage, I need to see you. My father has gone crazy. He's putting a maid above his own daughter. I need you to help me get back what's mine. On the other end of the line, Damien smiled a smile. Regina couldn't see, a shark smile that smelled blood in the water. Don't worry, my love, he replied in a velvety voice. I will always be on your side. No one will take what belongs to you. Tell me everything, absolutely everything, about your father, his fortune, and his businesses, and leave it to me. And as Regina, blind with rage, told this man every detail of the Sterling Empire, she didn't realize that she was opening the door to the true wolf, not the humble cleaner who cared for her sick daughter, but a predator who, from the shadows, had already set his sights on much more than an emerald necklace. In the kitchen, Elsie McTavish served a plate of hot food to Lucy and winked at Catherine. See, my dear, I told you, evil makes a lot of noise, but it trips over itself. Today you won a battle, but listen closely. She lowered her voice, looking towards the hallway. The real war is just beginning, and it smells like it's coming from outside. Catherine hugged her daughter and looked out the window at the sunset that tinged the mansion gardens with gold. She didn't know how right the old woman was. It was in the early hours of the morning when Catherine's scream woke the entire mansion. Help! Please! Someone help me! My daughter isn't breathing well. Lucy was burning with fever. Her small body trembled with chills, her lips had turned blue, and she was breathing with an agonizing wheeze, as if the air was escaping through her fingers. Catherine held her in her arms, desperate, not knowing what to do, her heart broken into 1,000 pieces. Lucy, my love, stay with me. Look at me, darling. Look at me. Elsie McTavish was the first to arrive, in her nightgown, holding a candle. One look was enough to understand the gravity. This is serious, child. We have to take her to the hospital right now. I don't have money, Elsie, Catherine sobbed. The hospital asked for an advance last time, and I couldn't pay it. I don't know what to do. My God, I don't know what to do. And then a firm voice resonated from the doorway. I know what to do. It was Alexander. He had come down after hearing the screams, in his pajamas, with disheveled hair and a tense face. He crossed the room in 2 strides, looked at the girl, and made a decision without hesitation. Give her to me, he said, extending his arms. My car will be ready in 30 seconds. I know the director of the best hospital in the city. I'll call on the way. We're not going to lose a single minute. Sir, I can't pay, Catherine stammered through tears. I didn't ask if you could pay, Alexander replied, taking Lucy in his arms with surprising gentleness for such an imposing man. I said, we're going to the hospital now. Get in the car. And so, in the middle of the night, the city's most powerful millionaire sped through the empty streets with a sick child in the back seat, her mother crying beside her, and his phone pressed to his ear, giving orders for the best medical team to be waiting at the emergency room door. The hours at the hospital were eternal. Catherine paced back and forth in the waiting room, wringing her hands, praying softly. Alexander remained seated in silence, elbows on his knees, his gaze lost. He didn't leave. He could have left. He had fulfilled his duty to drive them. He had paid. He had done more than enough, but he didn't move. He stayed for her, for the child. You should go rest, sir, Catherine said at last, her voice hoarse. You've already done too much for us. I can never repay you. I won't leave until I know she's all right, he interrupted. And I don't want you to repay me anything. He paused, looking at his hands. You know, when my wife fell ill, I had all the money in the world, the best doctors, the best hospitals, the best treatments, and yet I couldn't save her. I learned then that money is useless if you don't use it for the only thing that matters, taking care of people. Today I can help your daughter, and that, Catherine, gives meaning to my entire fortune. Catherine looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. In this man, whom everyone feared for his power and coldness, she discovered a deep nobility, hidden under years of grief and solitude. At dawn, the doctor finally came out. The girl is stable, he announced. She arrived just in time. An hour more and the story would have been different. But there's something we need to discuss. His face grew serious. Lucy has a congenital heart condition. It's treatable, even operable, but it requires specialized surgery and costly treatment. Without it, these episodes will recur and become increasingly dangerous. Catherine felt the world collapsing. She knew about her daughter's heart. She had been working like a beast for years to save up money for that operation, which she never managed to afford. How much does it cost? She asked in a thin voice. The doctor mentioned a figure, an impossible figure, a figure Catherine wouldn't accumulate in 20 years of cleaning floors. Catherine covered her face with her hands and slumped into a chair, defeated. Do it, Alexander said then, addressing the doctor. Catherine looked up, incredulous. What? The operation, Alexander repeated calmly. Schedule it as soon as possible with the best surgeon. I will cover all expenses, absolutely all of them. Sir, no, I can't accept that. Catherine stood up, trembling. It's too much. It's a fortune. I have no way to repay you. What will people think? What will your daughter think? No, sir, please, I can't. Alexander gently took her by the shoulders and looked her in the eyes. Catherine, listen carefully. This is not charity. It's a child's life, Lucy's life. Are you really going to let your pride stand between your daughter and her health? I lost the person I loved most because medicine wasn't enough. You have the opportunity not to lose yours. Let me help you, not out of pity, but out of he hesitated, searching for the word out of humanity, out of something I thought was dead in me, and that your daughter, with her child's questions, reawakened. Catherine burst into tears, but this time it wasn't a cry of pain, but of such immense relief that it shook her entire soul. She covered her mouth with her hands, unable to speak, and could only nod again and again as tears streamed down her cheeks. Thank you, she finally managed to say. God bless you, sir. God bless you 1,000 times. And in that hospital corridor, under the cold light of dawn, something invisible was sealed between those two very different beings. It wasn't love yet, but it was the seed of something. Respect, tenderness, a connection that neither class differences nor money could explain. What neither of them knew was that miles away, in a luxury apartment, a very different conversation was taking place. He spent the night out with the maid. Damien Thorne's voice sounded sweet, but inside it seethed with calculation. My love, don't you see what's happening? Your father is losing his mind over that woman. And when a rich man loses his mind over someone, you know what's next? The will, the properties, the company, everything that should be yours will end up in the hands of a cleaner and her sick daughter. Regina, sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine in her hand, felt the poison of those words seep into her bones. "I won't allow it," she said, clenching the glass. "Of course not," Damien purred, sitting beside her and stroking her hair. "And I'm going to help you make sure it doesn't happen. Trust me, you and I together are unstoppable, Regina. I just need you to give me access to some of your father's documents. Information about the businesses, accounts, contracts, those boring things, to protect your interests, to make sure that woman doesn't steal what's yours." Regina looked at him. A very small part of her, that part buried under years of solitude, felt that something didn't quite fit, that Damien was asking too much about money and too little about her. But she was so alone, so hurt, so eager for someone to be on her side, that she silenced that inner voice. "I'll get you the documents," she said. Damien smiled and kissed her on the forehead. But in his eyes, if Regina had known how to look, there was no love. There was hunger. The cold, patient hunger of the predator who has already spotted his prey and is only waiting for the moment to close his jaws. Days later, Lucy returned to the mansion. The operation was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and in the meantime, the child regained her strength. The house gradually began to transform. Where there had once been silence, now the laughter of a child running through the gardens could sometimes be heard. Alexander, to everyone's surprise, began to come home earlier from the office. He would sit in the conservatory, listening to Lucy tell her made-up stories, while Catherine watched them from a distance with a new warmth in her heart. Elsie McTavish noticed everything from the kitchen with her wise old woman's smile. "See, my dear," she told Catherine one afternoon as they kneaded bread together, "I told you something big was changing in this house. The master has been dead in life for 10 years, and look how he's coming back to life thanks to you and that child." "Don't say that, Elsie," Catherine replied, blushing. "The master is just kind to us, nothing more." "Oh, really?" The old woman raised an eyebrow mischievously. "And I'm the Queen of England. Those eyes he looks at you with aren't just kindness, child. But anyway, the heart knows what pride keeps silent." Catherine didn't reply, but that night, as she sang the lullaby to Lucy with the music box, she found herself thinking of Alexander, of his deep voice, of the way he had held her daughter in his arms, of how, for the first time in years, she didn't feel so alone in the world. What she didn't imagine was that while she dreamed of a better future, in the shadows of that same house, a spider's web was being spun, and very soon, Regina and Damien would unleash a plan so cruel that it would test not only her dignity, but the love that was just beginning to blossom, the temptation to leave. Regina and Damien's plan was poisonous in its simplicity. If they couldn't force Catherine out, they would destroy her with slander. It all began one morning when Catherine entered the dining room to serve breakfast and found an envelope at her place on the service table. Inside was a thick wad of bills and a typewritten note. "Thank you for your services and for keeping the master of the house company. Here is your reward. Be discreet." Catherine felt nauseous. She immediately understood the trap. Someone wanted to make her out to be a woman who sold herself, an opportunist, seducing the employer for money, and that someone had a name. But the worst was yet to come. That same afternoon, during a lunch where Alexander had invited several important business partners, Regina dropped her venom with the coldness of a snake. "Dad, you've been so generous with the staff lately," she said loudly, making sure all the guests heard. "You paid for a very expensive operation for the cleaner's daughter. You give her your time, even envelopes with money." She paused dramatically. "People are starting to talk, you know. They're saying very nasty things. They're saying that woman got into this house to marry you, that she's using her sick daughter to soften your heart and your wallet." An uncomfortable silence spread across the table. The partners exchanged glances. Catherine, who was serving wine at that moment, froze, the jug trembling in her hand. "Regina," Alexander warned, his jaw tense. "I'm just saying what everyone thinks, Dad," she continued with feigned innocence. "It's for your own good. I don't want an arriviste taking advantage of your kindness. Or are you going to tell me you didn't leave her an envelope with money this morning?" "I didn't leave any envelope," Alexander replied, frowning. "Oh, no," Regina smiled. "Well, that's strange, because she has one. Ask her. Ask her how much she was paid for her services." All eyes turned to Catherine. She felt the weight of those eyes like embers on her skin. Slowly, she placed the jug on the table, took the envelope she had found that morning from her apron pocket, and placed it in front of Alexander. "This appeared in my spot today, sir," she said in a firm voice, though she was trembling inside, "with an infamous note that insults my honor and yours. I haven't touched a single bill. I was going to give it to you in private to avoid further scandal. but since Miss Regina mentions it in front of everyone, I prefer that everyone see the kind of trap being set for me in this house." She opened the envelope and displayed the intact money along with the note. Alexander read the note, his face darkened with a cold, terrible anger. He looked at his daughter. Regina hesitated for a second. She hadn't expected Catherine to expose the trap with such composure, nor to return the money untouched. "Who wrote this?" Alexander asked in a voice that chilled the blood. "I have no idea, Dad," Regina lied, shrugging. "I'm just repeating what's rumored." "Well, the rumors end today," Alexander declared, standing up. He addressed his guests with imposing dignity. "This woman, Catherine Reed, is the most honorable person who has set foot in this house in many years. She has just returned money that anyone else would have kept in silence. Anyone who has something to say about her, say it to me, to my face. And anyone who prefers to spread slander, know that you will deal with me. Have I been clear?" No one dared to reply. The intimidated partners nodded and quickly changed the subject. Regina sank into her chair, defeated once more, as hatred gnawed at her insides. But the damage was partly done. That night, Catherine made a painful decision. Elsie McTavish found her packing her suitcase in the staff quarters. "What are you doing, child?" the old woman asked, alarmed. "I'm leaving, Elsie," Catherine replied, folding her uniforms with trembling hands. "As soon as Lucy has her operation and recovers, we're leaving this house. I can't stay here. My presence only brings trouble to the master." Today he was humiliated in front of his partners because of me. His name, his reputation, everything gets stained by being near me. The best thing I can do for him is disappear. "But, child, that's exactly what that viper wants," Elsie protested. "If you leave, they win." "I don't care who wins," Catherine said, tears in her eyes. "All I care about is my daughter and the dignity of the man who saved our lives. I won't allow them to drag him through the mud for defending a cleaner. I care about him too much too." She stopped abruptly, surprised by her own words. Elsie smiled tenderly. "You care about him?" she repeated softly. "You said it yourself, my dear." Catherine covered her face with her hands. "That's why I have to go, Elsie, because what I feel is impossible. He's a sterling. I clean his floors. There's an abyss between us that no feeling can cross, and staying here dreaming of something that will never happen would only hurt both of us." At that instant, a deep voice spoke from the doorway. "And what if I don't believe in that abyss?" It was Alexander. He stood in the doorway, and by his expression, he had heard more than Catherine would have wanted. Elsie, with the discretion of her 40 years of service, mumbled, "I'll check on the bread," and slipped away, leaving them alone. "Sir," Catherine stood up, wiping her tears away quickly. "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry if you heard something that—" "Catherine," Alexander approached slowly. "I saw you packing your suitcase. Tell me the truth. Are you leaving because of the rumors? Because of what my daughter said? Or are you leaving out of fear of what you feel?" She lowered her gaze, unable to answer. "Because I feel it too," he continued, and his voice, usually so firm, trembled slightly. "I've been trying to deny it for days, telling myself I'm a foolish old man, that it's absurd, that you and I come from different worlds. But then I see you singing to your daughter. I see you returning money that offends you. I see you holding your head high when everyone wants to see you fall. And I realize that in this house full of gold, you are the only true thing there is. I don't want you to leave, Catherine. I'm asking you, stay." Catherine looked at him, her heart beating so hard she could barely breathe. "Sir, think about what you're saying," she whispered. "Your family, your partners, society as a whole. No one would ever accept anything between us. They would destroy you and my daughter too. I couldn't bear to be the cause of your ruin." "I don't care about society," Alexander replied. "I spent 10 years living for what people would say, for business, for an empty reputation, and I was profoundly unhappy. You and your daughter gave me back something I thought was lost forever. I'm not going to give that up for fear of gossip." He took Catherine's hands in his. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give. I'm just asking you not to run away, to stay, to give us the chance to discover what this is that's growing between us." The contact of those hands, the warmth of that gaze, broke down all of Catherine's defenses. Tears streamed freely down her face, and for an instant, the abyss between their two worlds seemed to vanish, replaced by something much stronger than any class difference. "I'll stay," she said at last in a whisper. "God help us. I'll stay." Alexander closed his eyes for an instant, like someone finally releasing a burden they had carried for too long, and he wiped a tear from her cheek with a tenderness that no business, no contract, no million had ever taught him. "You won't regret it," he murmured. "I promise you. I will take care of you and Lucy like no one ever has. And when that child comes out of surgery healthy and strong, the three of us will start anew, without fear." Catherine rested her forehead on the chest of this man who smelled of wood and strength. And for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to believe that, perhaps, just perhaps, life had something good reserved for her. Outside, hidden behind the corner of the hallway, a figure had heard every word. Regina, her face distorted, her nails dug into the palms of her hands, felt the world crashing down on her. Her father, her own flesh and blood, declaring his love for a cleaner, replacing her, erasing her. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and typed a message to Damien. "It's not just about money anymore. My father is in love with her. We have to act now. I want that woman to disappear from our lives forever. I don't care how." Damien's reply came in seconds, cold as ice. "Don't worry, my love, I have a plan. And when it's finished, not only will she disappear, but your father's entire fortune will be ours. Trust me. Soon, very soon, everything will change." And while a pure and true love was born in the staff quarters, in the shadows of the mansion, the knives of betrayal were being sharpened. The storm was about to break, the betrayal that crossed all limits. The news spread through the mansion like wildfire. Mr. Alexander Sterling had announced in front of all the staff gathered in the grand drawing room that Catherine Reed was no longer just an employee. From today on, he declared in a firm voice, taking Catherine's hand before the astonished gaze of all, "Catherine and her daughter Lucy are part of my family. I treat them with the respect they deserve, and I expect everyone in this house to do the same. Anyone who disagrees knows the door." Elsie McTavish was the first to applaud, tears of emotion rolling down her wrinkles. "Finally, sir," she exclaimed. "It was about time this house had a heart again." The rest of the staff, who adored Catherine for her nobility, joined in the applause. For a moment, the entire mansion was filled with a warmth that had been absent for years. Catherine, blushing and emotional, squeezed Alexander's hand and looked for her daughter. Lucy, sitting on Elsie's lap, applauded without fully understanding, but happy to see her mother smile. Only two people didn't applaud. At the top of the stairs, Regina watched the scene, her face pale, her eyes burning with a hatred she could no longer contain. And beside her, recently arrived and with his snack and smile, was Damien Thorne, observing everything with the calculating calm of someone who already had a plan in motion. "Look at her," Regina muttered through clenched teeth, the cleaner putting on airs like a lady. "In my house, taking my mother's place." Her voice broke. "My father prefers her. He prefers the cleaner's daughter over me." "Don't worry, my love," Damien murmured, putting his arm around her waist. "Let her enjoy her little party. It will be her last. Everything is almost ready. I just need you to do one last thing for me. Something that will change everything." "Anything," Regina replied, blind with spite. "Anything to get my father back and get that woman out of our lives." What Damien asked her to do next was so cold and cruel that even Regina, in the deepest recesses of her resentment, felt a chill, but the pain of feeling replaced outweighed her conscience, and she accepted. The following days, however, were the happiest Catherine had ever known. Alexander treated her like a queen. They went out to dinner, strolled through the gardens, talked until dawn about life, dreams, and past wounds. Lucy blossomed, ate better, laughed more, and called Alexander Mr. Alex with a trust that melted the millionaire. Only a few days remained until the operation, and hope filled every corner of the house. "Do you know what I want when I get better, Mum?" Lucy said one afternoon as Catherine brushed her hair. "I want Mr. Alex to be my real dad. Can I ask for that?" Catherine smiled, her eyes moist. "You don't ask for that, my love. That just happens when it's meant to be. You concentrate on getting strong for your operation." But the shadow was drawing near. The eve of the surgery, Catherine noticed something strange. The bottle of medicine Lucy was supposed to take before the operation, a delicate medication that regulated her heart, and which the doctor had insisted be administered with absolute precision, was in a different place than where she had left it. And the pills looked slightly different. The color wasn't exactly the same. A mother's instinct, that infallible sixth sense, made her skin crawl. "Lucy," she said with feigned calm, "my love, did you take your medicine today?" "Not yet, Mum. Miss Regina was going to give it to me. She said you were busy and she would help me. She was very kind. She even brought me a glass of juice." Catherine's blood ran cold. Regina had never, in all those months, approached Lucy with kindness. Never. And suddenly she offered to give her medicine. She took the bottle, examined the pills closely, and her heart stopped. They had been swapped. Someone had replaced her daughter's medication with something else. "Don't take any of this," she told Lucy firmly, putting the bottle away. "Not a single pill, Do you hear me? Wait for me here. Don't move. Catherine ran, the bottle clutched to her chest, straight to Alexander's study, bursting in without knocking. Alexander, she called him by his first name for the first time in her desperation. Someone changed Lucy's pills. Look, they're not hers. If she had taken them before the operation. Alexander took the bottle, examined it, and his face transformed into a mask of chilling fury. Who had access to this? Regina, Catherine replied, trembling. Lucy told me Regina offered to give her the medicine, that she brought her juice. Alexander, your daughter. Your daughter tried to harm my child. For an instant, the millionaire didn't want to believe it. It was his flesh and blood, his only daughter. But the adulterated bottle in his hands left no room for doubt. He immediately called the doctor, who analyzed the pills urgently. The diagnosis was chilling. The original medication had been replaced with a compound that, administered to a child with Lucy's condition just before surgery, would have caused a fatal cardiac arrest. They would have attributed it to surgical complications. A perfect crime. Alexander summoned Regina to the study. When she entered, with her usual haughty demeanor, she found her father standing by the fireplace, holding the bottle, and Catherine with reddened eyes. "Is this why you called me?" Regina said. "Another scene with the cleaner? Did you change the child's pills?" Alexander asked in a voice so low and terrible that it was more frightening than a scream. Regina hesitated, only for a second, but that second betrayed her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. "Lucy said you were going to give her the medicine today," Catherine intervened. "That you brought her juice. Do you deny it?" "I just wanted to help," Regina defended herself. "Now, even that's a crime? You two are paranoid. You're looking to blame me for everything." Alexander walked towards her slowly and showed her the bottle inches from her face. "The doctor analyzed these pills, Regina. Someone swapped them for a poison that would have killed a 6-year-old child during her operation, and you were the only one who had access to them today." His voice broke, not from weakness, but from immense pain. "Tell me it wasn't you. Look me in the eyes and tell me my daughter is not capable of murdering an innocent child. Tell me, and I will believe you." Regina opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out. Her eyes, for a fleeting instant, filled with genuine tears, because deep down in her soul, corrupted by resentment, a part of her knew what she had been about to do and was horrified by herself. She stammered, Damien said. "He convinced me that." Her voice broke. "I didn't want to kill her, Dad, I swear. He told me it was just to make the child a little sick, to postpone the operation, to make that woman leave. I didn't know it was poison. I swear on Mum's memory." The silence that followed was devastating. Alexander looked at her like a stranger. The daughter he had spoiled, that he had ignored for years, buried in his work, that he had allowed to grow in a garden of solitude and resentment. That daughter had been capable of complicity in a crime. "Damien," Alexander repeated slowly. "Damien gave you the compound?" Regina, distraught, nodded through sobs. "He gave me the bottle. He told me to swap it. He told me to trust him, that it was all for our good, for our future together." She looked up, and for the first time in years, she looked at her father not with arrogance, but with the terror of a lost child. "What did I do, Dad? What did I do?" Catherine, who had instinctively hugged Lucy when the child peeked fearfully through the door, looked at Regina and amidst her own terror and motherly rage, managed to see something Alexander, blinded by betrayal, still didn't see, that behind that villain was a broken woman, manipulated, used as an instrument by someone far more dangerous. Because the true monster of that story was not in that study. He was outside, in his luxury apartment, uncorking a bottle of champagne, prematurely celebrating a death he believed was already underway, and planning the next step of a scheme that sought not a necklace or revenge, but the entire fortune of the Sterling Empire. And what Damien Thorne didn't know was that his plan had just failed, that the child was alive, and that from that night on, Alexander Sterling would not rest until he ripped off his mask and made him pay for each of his betrayals. The hunt was about to reverse. Damien's mask falls. That night, no one slept in the Sterling mansion. Lucy, oblivious to the horror that had almost occurred, finally slept peacefully under the watchful eye of a private doctor Alexander had arranged to guard her until the operation. Catherine never left her daughter's side, and Alexander, locked in his study, burned with a cold, methodical fury. He wasn't going to call the police, not yet, because Damien was cunning, and a hasty accusation, without solid evidence, would crumble before the lawyers. A man like him surely had. No, Alexander Sterling hadn't built an empire by being impulsive. He was going to hunt the hunter, and for that, he needed proof. Proof that would destroy Damien Thorne completely. Elsie, he called the old woman in the early hours. I need your help and Catherine's. We're going to unmask that snake, but for that, I need to know everything Regina gave him. It was Catherine who had the idea that would change everything. Regina said she gave him access to the company documents, she recalled. If Damien only wanted to separate us, why would he need the business papers? Something doesn't add up, Alexander. That man didn't come for revenge. He came for money. For a lot of money. Alexander looked at her. An understanding gleamed in his eyes. You're right. The poison, the rumors, it was all a smokescreen. What he's really after is something else. He stood up abruptly. I'm going to review the company's movements. If he touched a single cent, I'll find it. But it was Regina who found the first piece of the puzzle. That morning, devastated by guilt, unable to sleep, the heiress picked up the phone and called Damien. She needed to hear his voice. She needed him to tell her that everything would be all right, that she wasn't the monster she felt herself to be. She dialed again and again. He didn't answer. She called at dawn, still no answer. And then a chilling premonition took hold of her. She grabbed the keys to Damien's apartment. He had given her a copy in one of his gestures of false trust, and she drove there. What she found left her breathless. The apartment was half empty, suitcases half packed, documents burning in a wastebasket, and on the desk, a laptop Damien had forgotten to close in his haste. Regina read, and as she read, her whole world collapsed. They were emails between Damien and a foreign partner. They talked about transfers, offshore accounts, an operation to divert funds from the Sterling Group using the access and information Regina had blindly given him. They talked about millions, and in one of the messages, Damien wrote with a coldness that froze her blood, "The Sterling girl is just a means, a foolish, resentful woman in love. As soon as I have control of the accounts and eliminate the obstacles, I'll get rid of her too. No one will suspect the poor abandoned heiress. Soon, I'll own everything." There was more, much more. Photographs of Damien with another woman, rings, plans for a life together abroad. Damien had an accomplice. Regina had never been more than a pawn, a disposable instrument. She had been used, manipulated, emptied of everything, and they planned to discard her like trash as soon as she was no longer useful. Regina stared at one of the photographs for a long time. In it, Damien smiled, embracing that other woman on a beach with the same silken smile with which he had so often deceived her, the same smile with which he had promised her eternal love, with which he had dried her tears when she cried for her father, with which he had convinced her to cross all lines. Every sweet word, every caress, every promise, it had all been a performance, a cold, meticulous act to reach the Sterling fortune, and she, blind with loneliness, had applauded the show without realizing she was the victim. Regina fell to her knees in that apartment, hugging herself, shaken by a deep, guttural cry. All her cruelty, all her resentment, all her war against Catherine. For what? She had been on the verge of killing an innocent child. She had betrayed her own father. She had sold her family's empire, and all of it to please a man who had never loved her, who had only seen her as a tool and a wallet. She thought of her mother, of what Beatrice would say if she saw her now, kneeling in a scammer's apartment, an accomplice to attempted murder. Shame burned inside her like a hot iron, but in the midst of that collapse, something ignited. Not resentment, something different, a terrible and painful clarity. For the first time, Regina saw herself with honesty, and what she saw disgusted her. She took the laptop, she took the documents Damien hadn't managed to burn, and trembling, she drove back to the mansion in the early hours. When she arrived, she found her father awake in the study with Catherine by his side, both reviewing papers. Regina stopped in the doorway. For an instant, old pride urged her to turn around and flee, but she didn't. She entered, her face swollen from crying, and placed the laptop and documents on the desk. "Here's everything, Dad," she said, her voice broken. "The evidence. Damien is emptying the company. He's been doing it for months, and her voice broke again. He plans to kill me too when he's finished. I never mattered to him. He used me. He used me for everything." Alexander looked at her, stunned. Catherine, by his side, held her breath. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Regina continued, tears streaming down her face unchecked. "I know I did horrible things. I almost killed that child." She looked at Catherine, and for the first time, there was no contempt in her eyes, but abysmal shame. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to give you this before I leave, to fix, even a little, all the harm I've done, so that man doesn't get away with it." There was a long, heavy silence, and then it was Catherine, not Alexander, who stepped forward. "Where do you plan to go?" the cleaner asked with a softness that disarmed Regina. "I don't know," the heiress murmured. "Far away, where I won't hurt anyone else. Running away fixes nothing," Catherine said. "I know that well. I lived running from pain for a long time." She approached Regina. "You did something terrible. I won't deny it. My daughter could have died, and I will never forget that. But you were also used, manipulated, made to believe that hatred was the only way your father would see you again. And that didn't start with you, Regina. It started when a little girl lost her mother and was left alone in a house full of silence." Regina looked at her, perplexed. This woman whom she had humiliated, slandered, whose daughter she had almost murdered. This woman spoke to her with compassion. "Why are you kind to me?" Regina whispered. "After everything I've done to you, you should hate me." "Because hatred is what brought you here," Catherine replied. "And someone has to break that chain, even if it's me." She paused. "Stay. Face what you did. Help us stop Damien. Not for me, for yourself, so that one day you can look at yourself in the mirror again." Alexander watched the scene, his heart a knot in his chest, his daughter broken and repentant, and the woman he loved offering forgiveness where he still only felt fury. In that instant, he understood that Catherine had not only given him back the capacity to love, she was teaching him something even more difficult, the capacity to forgive. "Catherine is right," he finally said in a deep voice. "I won't pretend that what you did doesn't break my heart, Regina. It will take you a long time to repair this, and there will be consequences. But you are my daughter, and I recognize that I failed you. I let you grow up alone. I gave you things instead of affection, and I allowed resentment to poison you. That part is mine." He took a deep breath. "Stay. We will face Damien together as a family, and this time, I will be present." Regina burst into tears, and for the first time in years, she allowed her father to embrace her. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, Damien Thorne finished loading his suitcases, convinced that his plan was going perfectly. He didn't know the child was still alive. He didn't know Regina had discovered the truth. He didn't know that the evidence of his betrayal was already in the hands of the city's most powerful, and now most furious, man. He thought he was the hunter. He didn't know he had become the prey, and the next day, when he tried to deliver the final blow to seize the Sterling Group's accounts, he would discover that Alexander was waiting for him with evidence, with lawyers, with the police, and with a green-eyed cleaner who had turned an entire family's hatred into the beginning of their redemption. The climax was about to erupt. The plan to trap Damien Thorne was woven before dawn in Alexander's study, amidst cold coffee cups and the weight of a sleepless night. "He's going to try to transfer the accounts today," Alexander explained, pointing to the documents Regina had rescued. "According to these emails, he has the final operation scheduled for midday. Empty the Sterling Group's master accounts and disappear from the country this very afternoon. But there's something he doesn't know." "What is it?" Regina asked, her eyes still swollen from crying. "To move those amounts, he needs an in-person authorization, a biometric signature that only I can give." Alexander formed a cold smile. "I made him believe, through the access you gave him, that this authorization was compromised. He's going to come here himself to get it, thinking the coast is clear." Catherine, standing by the window, shivered. "It's dangerous, Alexander. That man tried to kill a child. That's why we won't be alone," he replied. "Detective Inspector Miller, an old trusted friend, will arrive with his men before Damien. They'll be hidden. I just need to make him confess everything in front of the microphones the police will place. His words will be his condemnation." Regina stood up, determined. "It's the least I can do to repair the damage. Let me be the one to confront him." Alexander hesitated. It was risky, but looking at his daughter, not the arrogant villain of before, but a broken woman seeking redemption, he understood that she needed that opportunity to regain her self-respect. "All right," he conceded, "but Catherine and Lucy will stay upstairs, safe with the doctor. And you, Regina, make no false moves. At the first sign of danger, Miller's men will move in." At precisely noon, Damien's luxury car drove through the Sterling mansion gates. He entered with his silken smile, his impeccable suit, and his predator's confidence, believing himself master of the world. Regina received him in the grand drawing room, feigning a calm that cost her superhuman effort. "My love," Damien greeted, kissing her hand. "Everything is perfect. As soon as I get your father's authorization, we'll go far away. You and I, forever. Where's the old man?" "He'll be here in a moment," Regina replied. "But first, I need you to tell me the truth, Damien, about the child. The pills you gave me. What were they, really?" Damien laughed, relaxed, not suspecting that every word was being recorded. Oh, my darling, don't worry about that brat. It was a cardiac compound. If she had taken it, it would have looked like a natural heart failure during the operation. Clean, no traces. He shrugged with chilling indifference. One less nuisance. The child and her mother were the only obstacle between us and the fortune. They had to be eliminated. Too bad the operation was postponed, but it doesn't matter. There will be another opportunity. Regina felt nauseous but forced herself to continue. And me, Damien? She asked, her voice trembling. What will happen to me when you have the money? You? Damien looked at her with a smile that was no longer silken, but icy. You'll be Mrs. Thorne, of course, as long as you're useful to me. He leaned in, stroking her cheek. A resentful and lovesick heiress is the perfect cover, Regina. No one suspects the poor rich girl abandoned by daddy. You're convenient, much more convenient than you imagine. Convenient, Regina repeated, and a tear rolled down her cheek. That's all I was to you? Don't get sentimental now, Damien said with annoyance. We made a good team. You got me everything I asked for, and soon you'll be rich. Isn't that what you wanted? To get revenge on the cleaner, to get back what's yours. I gave you all that. You should be grateful. I've heard enough, a deep voice said from the doorway. Damien spun around. Alexander Sterling advanced into the center of the drawing room, and behind him, emerging from every corner, from behind the curtains of the side doors, appeared Detective Inspector Miller and half a dozen police officers with their weapons raised. Damien Thorne, Miller thundered. You are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, diversion of funds, and criminal association. Hands where I can see them. Damien's face transformed. The mask of seduction shattered, finally revealing the cornered animal he was inside. He looked at Regina with pure hatred. You! He roared. You set me up! No, Regina replied, wiping her tears and straightening up for the first time with true dignity. You set me up all these months. I just stopped being your puppet. She looked at him steadily. You're going to pay for what you tried to do to that child, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to atone for having believed you. Damien tried to flee, knocking over a chair, but Miller's men subdued him in seconds. As he was being handcuffed, he screamed threats, curses, promises of revenge. But it was nothing more than the useless roar of a caged beast. The recording had condemned him from his own mouth. His accomplice abroad would be arrested days later, thanks to the documents Regina had rescued. Damien Thorne's empire of lies was collapsing completely. When he was finally taken away, a profound silence fell upon the drawing room. Alexander approached his daughter, who was trembling. You did well, he said softly. You were very brave. I didn't do it out of bravery, Dad, Regina replied. I did it out of shame. And because, she looked towards the stairs where Catherine was descending with Lucy by the hand, because someone taught me that I still have time to choose who I want to be. Catherine approached. Regina looked at her, and this time she didn't lower her head out of pride, but out of humility. Catherine, she said, her voice broken, I know there are no words enough. I almost killed your daughter. I humiliated you. I slandered you. I treated you as an inferior being for months, and you offered me forgiveness when I only deserved contempt. I don't understand how, but thank you. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that that forgiveness was not in vain. Catherine took her hands. Forgiveness isn't shown with words, Regina, she replied sweetly. It's shown by changing, and that starts today. She smiled. I believe in second chances. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. And then a small voice interrupted the moment. Lucy, letting go of her mother's hand, approached Regina and looked at her with her big, curious eyes. Are you the sad lady? The child asked. Mr. Alex says you were sad inside and that's why you were grumpy. Aren't you sad anymore? Regina, the arrogant heiress who had never lowered herself before anyone, fell to her knees in front of the child whose life she had almost taken. Tears streamed uncontrollably. Yes, little one, she whispered. I was very sad, and I ask for your forgiveness. I did something terrible. I don't deserve it, but I ask for your forgiveness with all my heart. Lucy observed her for a moment with the solemn seriousness of children. Then, without further ado, she held out her teddy bear. Here, she said. When I'm sad, I hug my teddy, and I feel better. You can borrow him, but you have to give him back, okay? He's my favorite. That innocent gesture, that pure and undeserved kindness, finished breaking the last shell of Regina's heart. She hugged the teddy bear and cried as she hadn't cried since her mother's death. She cried for all the wrong she had done. She cried for the loneliness of so many years, and she finally cried with relief because someone was offering her a way back home. Alexander put one arm around Catherine and the other around his daughter. For the first time in a decade, The Sterling family was united, broken, wounded, imperfect, but united. And in their midst, a 6-year-old girl smiled, unaware that her fragile heart had been the heart that healed an entire house. That night, as the mansion returned to calm, Elsie McTavish served hot cocoa to everyone in the kitchen, employers and staff together, for the first time at the same table, and raised her cup with a triumphant old woman's smile. "What did I tell you, my dears?" she exclaimed. "Evil makes a lot of noise, but it always trips over itself, and kindness, even if it moves slowly, always reaches its destination. Cheers." Everyone laughed and toasted, but the story wasn't over yet, because the most important thing was missing: Lucy's operation. And it was also time for that love born between marble and aprons to finally find its place in the sun. The cleaner, who became a lady. On the day of the operation, the entire mansion woke up in vigil. Alexander had moved heaven and earth to get the best cardiovascular surgeon in the country. Catherine didn't leave her daughter's side until the last moment, holding her little hand as they prepared her to enter the operating room. "Mum, I'm a little scared," Lucy confessed, hugging the silver music box she had asked to bring with her. "Me too, my love," Catherine replied, kissing her forehead. "But, you know what? Fear is like a cloud. It passes, and behind it, there's always sunshine. You close your eyes, listen to Grandma's song, and when you wake up, Mum will be here, I promise you. And Mr. Alex too." Catherine looked at Alexander, who was by her side, holding the child's shoulder with a father's tenderness. "I'll be here too, champ," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't move from this door until you come out, I swear." Lucy smiled calmly and let them take her. Before crossing the operating room door, she handed the music box to Regina, who was waiting nearby. "Take care of it for me," the child asked, "and wind it up so the song doesn't stop." Regina, holding back tears, nodded and clutched the music box to her chest. The waiting hours were the longest in Catherine's life. She walked, she prayed, she sat, she got up again. Alexander didn't leave her side for a second, holding her hand, giving her strength with his presence. Regina, sitting in a corner, wound the music box again and again, letting that fragile lullaby fill the hospital corridor like a shared prayer. And Elsie McTavish prayed the rosary softly, her old fingers moving the beads. Finally, after 5 eternal hours, the surgeon came out, took off his mask, and smiled. "The operation was a complete success," he announced. "Lucy's heart will beat strong and healthy for many, many years. She's a brave girl. You can all relax now." Catherine fell to her knees, sobbing with joy. Alexander hugged her, and together they cried the happiest tears of their lives. Regina hugged Elsie, and the music box in her hands continued playing as if Lucy's grandmother, from heaven, was celebrating too. Lucy woke up hours later, weak but smiling, and the first thing she asked for was her music box and a hug from her 3 favorite people, her mum, Mr. Alex, and the lady who wasn't sad anymore. The following months completely transformed the Sterling mansion. Lucy fully recovered, running through the gardens, climbing trees, filling the house with laughter and drawings stuck on the walls. Alexander, unrecognizable, came home early from work to play with her and to have family dinners. The house, which for a decade had been a mausoleum of silence, became a home again, and Regina kept her word. It wasn't an easy or immediate change. She had to face the consequences of her actions. Alexander, with pain but with justice, temporarily withdrew her luxury allowance, her unlimited cards, her life as a capricious princess. He asked her to genuinely work at one of the group's foundations, one that helped single mothers and sick children. At first, Regina protested, but little by little, as she met those families who struggled with dignity, just as Catherine had struggled, something changed within her. She learned what money had never taught her: empathy, the value of effort, the joy of serving instead of being served. One afternoon, Catherine found her helping Elsie in the kitchen, laughing as she kneaded bread with flour on her nose. "You look happy," Catherine told her. "I've never been so happy," Regina replied, and it was true. "I spent my whole life believing that happiness was in having, and it turns out it was in giving." She looked at Catherine with sincere affection. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing something good in me when even I didn't see it." "I didn't see anything that wasn't already there," Catherine replied. "I just reminded you it existed." She wiped the flour from Regina's nose with an almost maternal gesture. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you're becoming, Regina. Of this woman, not the one before." Regina lowered her gaze, moved. "Do you know what's strangest?" she said softly. "I spent years hating you because I thought you had stolen my father's affection, and it turns out you were the only one who gave me back a family. I treated you like an enemy, and you became the sister I never had." The two women embraced in the middle of the kitchen, amidst the aroma of freshly baked bread, while Elsie pretended to wipe sweat to hide her tears. "Oh, you two crybabies," the old woman grumbled, though she was crying the most. "You're going to salt the bread with so many tears. Get to work, the dough doesn't knead itself." And then came the day the entire mansion awaited. Alexander Sterling proposed marriage to Catherine Reed in the conservatory, the same place where Lucy had met him, surrounded by the flowers he had planted in memory of a past love, and which now bloomed to celebrate a new one. "Catherine," he said, kneeling, "you came into my house to clean the dust, and you ended up cleaning something much deeper, the dust that covered my heart. You gave me back laughter, family, life. I don't care what society says. I don't care about classes or surnames. I only care about one thing, that you be my wife, that we grow old together, that the three of us be a real family. Will you marry me?" Catherine, with tears of happiness, answered what her heart had been shouting for months. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Lucy, hidden behind a rosebush, ran out with open arms. Yes, yes. Now Mr. Alex will really be my dad. The wedding was held at the mansion in spring, and it was unlike any party that house had ever known. There were no partners feigning smiles, no guests judging fortunes. There were those who truly mattered. Elsie crying with emotion in her best dress, the staff treated like family, the mothers and children from Regina's foundation, and presiding over it all, a 6-year-old girl who scattered flower petals with a smile that lit up the world. Catherine walked down the aisle in a simple, elegant dress, more beautiful than any heiress. And when she reached Alexander, Regina, her former enemy, now her soul sister, approached with a gift in her hands. "Here," Regina said, handing her the silver music box, newly polished, shining like new. "I had it restored so your mother's song will never stop playing in this family. It's my gift and my promise." Catherine opened the box, and the old lullaby, the same one that had played that first night when everything began, filled the garden with a sweet and eternal melody. The guests fell silent, and under that fragile music that had united everyone's destinies, Alexander and Catherine vowed their love forever. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said. And as they kissed, as Lucy applauded, and Elsie cried, and Regina smiled with a new heart, the woman who had come to that house to clean floors on her knees, the cleaner to whom a spoiled daughter had yelled, "Get back to work now," became Mrs. Sterling of the mansion, not out of self-interest, not out of ambition, but for something money can never buy, for kindness, for dignity, for the true love that blossoms when two souls recognize each other beyond uniforms and fortunes. That night, when the party ended and the moon lit the gardens, Catherine tucked Lucy into her new room, no longer the narrow staff quarters, but a bright room full of toys, and she wound the music box. "See, my love," she whispered, "I told you, fear is like a cloud. It passes, and behind it, there's always sunshine. And now we have a family, Mum," Lucy said sleepily. "A dad, a big sister, and even a grandma cook. We're rich, aren't we?" Catherine smiled and kissed her forehead. "We are rich, my daughter, but not because of the house or the money. We are rich because we have each other, because we never stopped being good, even when the world was cruel to us. And in the end, my love, always remember, kindness always, always wins." And as Grandma's lullaby continued to play softly in the silver box, mother and daughter fell asleep, embracing in a house that had finally found its heart again. Because sometimes the humblest person in the house is the one with the biggest soul. And sometimes the cleaner who dared to silence the millionaire's spoiled daughter ends up being the true lady of the mansion. The end.